Björn Andrésen, the beautiful boy whose own beautiful face would end up ruining his life. His beauty became a curse that followed him all the way to his death. He was named the most beautiful boy in the world, but that title came with a dark reality. The film industry didn't protect him, it used him. Directors pushed him, exposed him to adult environments, and treated him like an object instead of a 15-year-old kid. Björn later said he felt like a piece of meat thrown to the wolves. He was taken to places no teenager should be in, surrounded by adults who cared more about his image than his safety. Imagine being just a teenager, and people around you drag you into a gay nightclub like it's normal. That was the world Björn was forced into. In this video, we're going to look into the life of Björn Andrésen and how his extraordinary beauty, something the world worshipped, became the curse that followed him for the rest of his life, right up until the end. Björn Andrésen was born on January 26, 1955, in Stockholm, Sweden, where he grew up. His childhood was marked by trauma and loss. He never knew his father, an artist whose identity has never been confirmed, and when Björn was just 10 years old, his mother, Barbro Elizabeth Andrésen, died by suicide. She went missing in October 1965, and her body was discovered in a wooded area in May 1966. She lived a bohemian life, never revealed who Björn's father was, and often made it clear that she wanted more from life than being a mother to him and his half-sister. After her death, Björn was taken in by his maternal grandparents. Part of his early education took place at a boarding school in Denmark, and later he studied at Adolf Fredriks Music School in Stockholm. His introduction to the entertainment industry was strongly influenced by his grandmother, who, after losing her daughter, pushed and sometimes pressured Björn into acting and modeling. Her ambition was not about Björn's dreams, but her own desire to have a famous grandchild. At the age of 15, Björn Andrésen was cast by Italian director Luchino Visconti. Visconti had been searching across Europe for years, trying to find what he called the perfect beauty for the role of Tadzio in Death in Venice. He wanted a boy with honey-colored hair, beauty like a Greek god, being as cold as a statue, eyes like water, a face that looked almost unreal, beauty that felt like it didn't belong to this world. Someone so striking that you'd almost be scared to approach him because of how insanely beautiful he looked. After traveling through several European countries and failing to find what he wanted, Visconti was advised to visit Sweden. Dozens of boys auditioned, and nothing stood out, until Björn walked in. The moment Visconti saw him, he knew that was the one. That was the beauty he had been searching for. Björn was handpicked instantly, chosen purely for his ethereal looks. Visconti even introduced him to the press later as the most beautiful boy in the world. Björn had no acting experience, no training, and no idea what he was stepping into. But that didn't matter to Visconti. He wasn't looking for an actor, he was looking for a symbol, a face, a presence. Visconti fell in love with the idea of Björn's beauty and what it represented for the film, without considering how Björn himself felt about any of it. During the casting, the moment the director saw Björn, he didn't even think twice. He looked at him once and instantly knew, yeah, that's the guy. And in the actual casting video, the director's first words were literally, beautiful, undress. And as you can see in the clip, Björn himself was shocked. He even said, what? Because he wasn't expecting it at all. That moment basically showed how strongly his look hit them on the spot.
Bella, dis-lui d'enlever son pullover.
The role he was chosen for was Tadzio, a beautiful adolescent boy whom the main character, composer Gustav von Aschenbach, played by Dirk Bogarde, becomes obsessively fascinated with. In the story, Aschenbach travels to a seaside resort in Venice hoping to recover from exhaustion and creative burnout. Instead of peace, he finds himself overwhelmed by his fixation on Tadzio, a boy who, for him, represents pure beauty and artistic perfection. As a deadly epidemic spreads through Venice, the film shows how beauty, obsession, decay, and death all collide. Death in Venice isn't just a movie, it's an exploration of beauty as an ideal, and how that ideal can destroy anyone who chases it too far. And Björn Andrésen, at only 15 years old, became the real-life embodiment of that idea, long before he understood what it would cost him. During the filming of Death in Venice, Björn found himself in an environment he was completely unprepared for. During the production, almost the entire crew consisted of gay men from Visconti's close artistic circle, a group he worked with frequently on his films. Visconti even issued strict orders on set. No one was allowed to touch Björn, bother him, or even approach him unnecessarily. This wasn't out of kindness, it was part of a contract designed to protect Björn and also to preserve the image Visconti wanted for his film. Björn's role itself was simple on paper: walk in front of the camera, turn, smile, exist as a symbol of beauty. The story mostly revolves around Gustav von Aschenbach observing Tadzio from a distance. But the film's concept was already controversial for its time, a story built around an older composer developing an idealized obsessive admiration for an adolescent boy. Many producers refused to finance it unless the character was changed to a girl. Visconti completely refused. He insisted on keeping the story faithful to the original book and maintaining the author's intended message.
La perfection de l'amour.
Mais lorsque vous avez proposé le sujet à différents producteurs, je suppose qu'une histoire d'amour entre un homme vieillissant, un compositeur et un adolescent, cela a dû poser quelques problèmes.
Ça posait quelques problèmes, et surtout ça posait un problème à un producteur qui avait proposé de mettre une petite fille à la place de Tadzio. Ce que je ne pouvais pas, j'ai dit non, je refuse de mettre une Tadzia. Ça n'avait plus le même sens, vous comprenez?
Björn, only 15, signed on to the film for about $4,000, not knowing that this single role would follow him for the rest of his life, shaping both his image and his destiny in ways he never imagined.
Quand vous avez commencé à le chercher, est-ce que vous aviez une idée précise, comme ils disent,
Exactement ce qu'il est. Exactement ça.
comme si vous aviez une photographie de...
Oui, en effet, quand je l'ai vu, c'était le 6e qui s'est présenté. J'étais immédiatement sûr. Il est blond, il a ce profil parfait et des yeux gris. Vous voyez, il a des yeux exactement gris. Couleur de l'aube, dit M. Mann. En effet, c'est cette couleur d'aujourd'hui. Il fallait qu'il soit vraiment froid comme une statue. Il a très bien compris le rôle, il est parfait. Il n'y a pas de danger de glisser dans la sexualité, ce qui serait une grave erreur.
After the release of Death in Venice, Björn Andrésen became an overnight international icon of beauty. His role in the Franco-Italian film earned him the global label the most beautiful boy in the world, a description that would follow him for the rest of his life. Fan mail poured in, bags of letters from teenagers, adults, and admirers from all around the world. The film premiered on March 1, 1971, in London, attended by Queen Elizabeth II and Princess Anne. It was there that Visconti publicly introduced Björn with the now famous phrase. A year later, at the Cannes Film Festival, international headlines repeated the same title, cementing his image in pop culture. At the Cannes press conference, Visconti addressed journalists in French and declared that now Andrésen was 16 years old, he was too old, and no longer beautiful. The room laughed at the expense of Andrésen. Unable to speak the language, he smiled, not realizing he was the punchline.
Il était plus beau que ça, hein, parce qu'il a vieilli maintenant. Il est un peu trop grand, il a les cheveux trop longs. Enfin, il était beaucoup plus beau à ce moment-là. Il ne le sait pas, mais il est en train de changer. Peut-être que ça sera un très beau, bel homme, mais pour le moment, bon. C'est l'âge ingrat, c'est l'âge ingrat. Il a maintenant 15 ans. 16. Il est très vieux.
But once filming ended, the protection of his contract ended too. Björn suddenly found himself exposed to a world he had never been prepared for. After the premiere, Visconti brought him to a gay nightclub with a group of adults from his circle. Björn was only a teenager, overwhelmed, surrounded by strangers staring at him intensely. Andrésen has no memory of how he got home. He later described the experience as hell, saying he felt deeply uncomfortable and out of place. Björn said he drank heavily that night just to numb the anxiety and confusion, and he doesn't even remember how he got home afterward, so you can imagine what could have happened that night. In interviews years later, he explained that he felt like he was being looked at as an object rather than a person, saying, "The waiters at the club looked at me uncompromisingly as if I was a nice meaty dish." He also said that reacting or speaking up would have felt like social at the time. It was the first of many situations where he felt completely unprotected. Looking back, he said that during filming itself he never felt unsafe, but everything afterward was different. Once it was over, I felt like a piece of meat thrown to the wolves. Physically, nothing happened to me, but it was still very unpleasant. Andrésen says I never even got a glance from the male crew, who were all gay. But never did I feel looked at in a special or suspicious way. That came after the film was done, and then nobody cared. Although Visconti issued a hands-off warning to his team for principal photography, that all changed when the film wrapped. In the documentary, Andrésen describes Visconti and the crew's behavior at the gay bar as though, in their minds, they were giving me a... Björn later accused Visconti, who died in 1976, of being a cultural predator who allegedly exploited his looks and sexualized him to promote the movie before throwing him to the wolves. The title "The Most Beautiful Boy in the World" became a burden he could never escape. He said the film cast a long gray shadow over his life, overshadowing everything else he tried to pursue. Looking back on his audition, Björn told Variety, "Visconti sexualized me and admitted he wasn't comfortable taking his clothes off. When they asked me to take off my shirt, I wasn't comfortable. I wasn't prepared for that. I remember when he posed me with one foot against the wall, I would never stand like that. When I watch it now, I see how that son of a sexualized me. I felt like an exotic animal in a cage." After the film's release, the attention around Björn did not slow down. In the United States, rumors began circulating that he was homosexual, partly because the role required him to exchange romantic glances with the protagonist, and in one scene, be kissed and touched by another teenage boy. Björn denied these rumors emphatically. Wanting to distance himself from the speculation and escape the pretty boy image, he avoided roles that played on his looks or implied homosexual themes. He was also angered when Germaine Greer used a photograph of him on the cover of her book The Beautiful Boy in 2003 without asking him. Although she consulted the photographer, David Bailey, who owned the copyright, Björn insisted that courtesy and standard practice required informing the person in the image, and he said he would never have agreed if he had been asked. After Death in Venice, Björn spent an extended period in Japan, where he became an instant cultural idol. His image flooded the youth market, fashion magazines, billboards, advertisements, and TV commercials, especially for products like Meiji chocolate. He even recorded several pop songs. This intense commercial activity cemented him as a central figure in the emerging beautiful boy aesthetic. Japanese media described his arrival in Tokyo as being comparable to the Beatles' landing in America. Crowds screamed, cameras flashed, and Björn received overwhelming attention, especially from young women. The promotion teams behind him paid attention to every detail, telling him what colors to wear, coaching him to move slowly and quietly, and encouraging him to speak less so he would appear mysterious and angelic, almost not from this world. Andrésen's youthful photogenic face inspired an entire wave of manga artists. Ryoko Ikeda, a celebrity in the shoujo manga world, started writing and illustrating The Rose of Versailles in 1972. Her character, Lady Oscar, a girl who dresses as a boy, was entirely based on Andrésen's depiction of Tadzio. Other Bishonen figures in manga are widely speculated to be directly mimicking Andrésen's teen aesthetic. During this time, Swedish media later reported that while in Japan, he was encouraged to use drugs to calm his nerves and dare to sing in front of audiences. And despite the worldwide fame, his acting career did not unfold the way people expected. Instead of new opportunities, he was repeatedly offered the same type of roles by the same type of people, characters focused only on beauty, sexuality, or the Tadzio image he was desperate to escape. After the film was released, Visconti never contacted him again. Bjorn later described this as another painful abandonment. Back in Europe, he continued acting but struggled to shake off the label of the world's most beautiful boy. In 1976, Bjorn traveled to Paris for a film project that ultimately fell apart. The movie never happened, but he stayed in the city for almost a year anyway, even though he had no money of his own. He was installed in an apartment by an older man and paid a generous stipend. Meals and gifts came his way from assorted male admirers. One even composed love poems in his honor. His entire lifestyle was funded by these wealthy older men, who showered him with expensive meals, covered his rent, and provided him with a weekly allowance of 500 French francs. To put that into perspective, 500 francs in 1976 is roughly the equivalent of $450 per week. That's a lot of money, especially back in 1976. Imagine that, a young man, barely in his 20s, living in Paris entirely supported by rich admirers. Bjorn later admitted he was bloody naive about their intentions towards him. He said, "I must have been bloody naive because it was sort of like, wow, everyone's so nice. I don't think they treated me out of the kindness of their heart. I felt like a wandering trophy." The documentary does not explore his sexuality in depth, but Bjorn previously revealed to the Daily Mail that he experienced a phase of confusion in his 20s and had one homosexual encounter. He said he tried it mainly to understand himself but realized it wasn't his cup of tea. He maintained that he had always been attracted to women but struggled to form real relationships as he grew older. After years of attention where he could snap his fingers and have girls approach him, he admitted he never actually learned how to flirt. He disappeared from public life so completely afterward that many people assumed he had died. He resurfaced in 2003 only because Germaine Greer's book cover used his old photo. He publicly condemned the way adults sexualized adolescents, by men or women, and said such attraction was nothing to romanticize. Outside of acting, Bjorn was a gifted pianist and musician. He also became a pop star in Japan after death in Venice and toured with the Sven Erik's dance band. Over the years, he cherished his bond with Japan and visited many times. Through it all, Bjorn struggled with the trauma of his childhood, the exploitation he faced as a teenager, and the suffocating fame he didn't want. His androgynous beauty influenced the entire Bishonen archetype in manga and anime, but behind the cultural impact was a man carrying decades of pain. His story shows the dark side of being turned into an icon before even understanding who you are. Back in Sweden, Bjorn tried to rebuild a quiet, normal life. He returned to what he truly loved, music. He was an accomplished pianist, a professional musician, and often worked as a music teacher between acting roles. During the 90s, he also lived with Teresa Schmeiderlo, and together they created several music and theater projects. In 1983, Bjorn married poet Susanna Roman. They welcomed their daughter, Robin, in 1984, and later their son, Elvin, in 1986. For a brief moment, life finally felt stable, peaceful, almost ordinary. But everything changed one tragic morning. After a night of heavy drinking, Bjorn fell asleep beside his infant son. He woke up to the sound of his wife screaming. Elvin was lying next to him, unresponsive, his lips already turning blue. Doctors called it sudden infant death syndrome, saying, "It happens, sometimes they just die." But Bjorn never accepted that explanation. He blamed himself, he believed he was responsible. He felt he hadn't given enough time, enough care, or enough presence as a father. He said the doctors called it SIDS, but he called it lack of love, because deep down he felt that his depression, his absence, and his dependence on medication and alcohol had failed his child. He never forgave himself. His depression deepened into something far darker than anything he had ever experienced. From there, he spiraled into alcohol abuse, self-destruction, and emotional collapse. And even decades later, the pain never left him. In a 2020 interview, Bjorn said that he believes he will meet his son again in the afterlife. In his last years, Bjorn was reported to be living alone in a squalid flat, chain-smoking and often bickering with his long-suffering, on-off girlfriend. He even got into trouble with his landlord for leaving his gas stove on. The fresh-faced teenager who had inspired a generation of manga artists and became one of Japan's first Western idols now looked worlds away from that image, sporting a perpetually nicotine-stained beard and long flowing white hair. Despite everything, he became a grandfather to two girls, Lo, born 2008, and Nike, born 2014. In his last years, Bjorn discovered the identity of his biological father through a DNA test. Footage of this revelation was cut from his 2021 documentary. "It's practically a story on its own," he says mysteriously. When asked how his feelings about Visconti had changed over the years, Andrésen challenged the assumption that forgiveness was impossible. "That's pretty harsh words," he said. "I don't think I ever said I can't forgive Licino. Of course I can. I just had to get it somewhat out of the system. Licino, your film and your epithet of me, the most beautiful boy in the world, did f up my life somewhat. Just being in the film, it chose my career. I didn't choose the career, it did. Today, I work as an actor, instead of as a musician. I've been playing and having music in me, and around me, since I was this big. He reflected on the trajectory of his life. My career is one of the few that started at the absolute top, and then worked its way down. That was lonely. I didn't choose death in Venice chose me. I would rather have built my life than be put on this pedestal. He also said he would have told Visconti to f off if the director were still alive, adding that the filmmaker didn't give a f about his feelings. I've never seen so many fascists and assholes as there are in film and theater, Andrésen said. Licino was the sort of cultural predator who would sacrifice anything or anyone for the work. In the same interview, he admitted that death in Venice screwed up his life quite decently, lamenting that he would forever be known primarily for that one film. Björn's adolescence left him with painful memories. After a lifetime marked by extraordinary beauty, fame, trauma, and quiet resilience, Björn Andrésen died aged 70 after a battle with cancer on October 25, 2025. His story reminds us how extremely attractive people often grow up in a completely different reality. In school, girls called him beautiful and angel lips. Andrésen once said, "When you snap your fingers, and you've got 10 chicks running after you, there's no need to learn any social skills for dealing with the opposite sex." It shows just how powerful looks can be. When you're that attractive, you don't need effort, game, or social skills, they come to you. Björn's story is very similar to Vasily Stepanov, another insanely attractive guy, 6 feet 3 tall, with looks that made girls go crazy. But his life also turned into something incredibly sad after he jumped from the 5th floor. To know what really happened to him, check out this video.